All right. Cool. And I'm gonna just talk a little bit to get started. Just to kind of set the stage. By way of introduction, my name is Guy. I run a Salesforce SI company that specializes in development. So we do a lot more what I coin development. And that's kind of a subjective term, but the vast majority of the work that we're doing is building complex automations for our clients. And so we're not doing a lot of consulting work, and we're not doing a lot of config work as it relates to creating fields and page layouts and things like that. And so we've, as a result of that, we've really developed, I think, a really strong expertise in writing requirements that are super clear. We've developed some really cool tooling that I'm going to show you guys here in just a little bit in our org. And the toolings and that we've built and the conventions that we've developed for writing those requirements are the absolute backbone of our company that we use for communicating to developers exactly what needs to happen when the solution is triggered or runs. And then it's the exact same set of instructions that we're actually passing to the QA folks on our team. And so I'm going to start a little bit big picture, kind of talking about where we do these things in our dev cycle. I'm going to show you guys just our real live Kanban board and click around in some real user stories, test cases, and tests in our org to show you exactly what we're up to, and would love questions, comments, feedback, interrupting during my presentation, because otherwise I'll just kind of drone on, and it's energizing when you get interrupted. And so yeah, does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So what the problem that we're solving with these toolings and things I'm going to show you here in a second are that I think most folks are leaving a lot of room for ambiguity in the requirements that they're working with, handing to developers, or just managing internally. And when you leave ambiguity in your requirements, you're asking the next person in the process to take a guess. And in Salesforce, we're not typically developing UI, right? The vast majority of the work that, at least from my experience, that we're doing when it comes to development is automation. So, and literally, what are we doing? We're creating records with a specific set of values. We're updating records with a specific set of values, and we're deleting records with a specific set of values when a super specific thing happens. And if, in my opinion, if you don't tell the developers exactly what those specific set of things are that meets the criteria for the expected actions to be executed, if you don't tell them exactly what those are, and literally on a field level and a record level, then you're asking them to take a guess. And if you don't tell them exactly what values should be assigned to every field and what scenarios every value should be assigned to every field, you're, in my opinion, I think you're asking them to guess, and they don't have enough context. They're not the folks that are interacting with users, having conversations with people about business process. And so you're, in my humble opinion, I think you're setting them up for failure. So I think we've solved that. And I'm going to start with sharing with you guys the Kanban board, which is just a regular old-fashioned Trello. There you go. That we use, which is going to kind of set the stage a little bit. And there's a couple of things that are absolutely essential, in my opinion, and to the way we operate at Landvale, which is that nothing gets built until the test cases and the user stories and are dialed in, and they're written and associated with a card on Trello. So now the developers don't even know the thing's coming until the testing instructions, which are their requirements, are actually written. And so if we look at our Kanban board for Landvale, all the way from completed through back to on hold, and then a little bit to the right of that, ready to discuss. the way we break this down is our ready to discuss column is this is an idea that's been mentioned, and we need to flush out what the exact spec are for that card with the client still. And so we're still having a conversation with that. It's not ready to be designed even. And solution design, so the area that we're going to be focusing on here is like the solution design to QA part. This is kind of like the bread and butter for what we're talking about. And solution design is where somebody, oftentimes myself, is writing the requirements, writing the testing instructions for whatever the heck we're building. And it's not until it gets pushed over here to ready for dev, gets pushed to in dev, goes to code review, and then QA, that anybody else other than the consultant or that's having the conversation and understands all the context of the requirements. It's not until all of that has been put down into our test cases and that it gets passed to developers and actually starts to be built. Does that make sense? Any questions about that so far?
A lot of head nodding in the room.
Cool. So it's a Kanban board, it's a development process. The key here is that the test case is written before anything is handed to the developer. That's kind of like why I wanted to show you this. And it's kind of like this is the column where there's a whole workflow around writing these things. Awesome. So let's switch over to our org, and we're looking at real documentation from one of our clients. And I'm going to start with giving you guys a quick run through of the architecture of the solution. And I think Evan mentioned in the post that we are going to make this solution available as an unmanaged package for free to anybody that's interested. You can see that's literally in development right now. So I promise it'll be done prior to Mid-Atlantic Dreaming. It is not quite done at this moment, but it will be. So if at the end of this you're like, oh my God, this is going to be so helpful, shoot me an email and I will just make sure that as soon as it's packaged, we send you a link so you can use it. But here we are. So at a high level, the architecture of the solution that we've built in Salesforce is at the top, epics. And epics they really don't contain any data. It's just a name related to an account. Within epics, we have our user stories. And again, there's very little on the user story. And I think this is kind of an important point because I think most people think of documentation and requirements as a user story. And they often think about those user stories as being narratives describing a user experience, which in my experience hasn't worked because it's, again, not enough detail and you're asking the developer to guess what the right answers are. And so our user stories are really just a collection of test cases. There's almost nothing being captured on our user story records other than really a name is the most important thing. But then when you dig in here to test cases, this is where the magic kind of starts to happen. And I'm going to start with this one in particular because this is a very simple test case. And at the end of this, I will also share, if you're interested, our test case conventions. So we have very specific instructions on how to write a test case and what is it that's bold and how do you do the indentations and why the heck is this font red is all kind of very clearly spelled out and there's a reason behind all of it. But this is for us a really simple test case. It's a set of instructions which describes an action that's going to trigger the automation, a list of criteria that needs to be in place in order for the specific outcome to occur, and then a description of exactly what the outcome ought to be. And just to highlight a couple of key points in the test case, we're always making the field name full. Sounds trivial, sounds simple. It's unbelievably helpful when these things, I'll show you in a second, a little bit more complicated test case. Um, Being able to just your eye immediately go to like, okay, that's a field. I got it. Don't need to think as you're reading through these things. Um, and then, so set of instructions. What is it that you're going to do to trigger the automation? What is the criteria that needs to exist in order for the expected outcome to occur? And then exactly what is the automation doing? In this case, it's very simple. It's a naming convention that's assigned to unit records. And here's the formula that we're using for compiling that name with a little note to help the developers along the way. I'm going to stop there for a second. Any questions so far? So you got epics, user stories, test cases. There's this rich text field with a bunch of details in it. Super simple.
Good so far. Yeah, I think we're
Cool.
good so far.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. So cool. What is it? Oh, there's all these people. Hey guys. So cool. Another piece of this that's really important is what the heck is the difference between any given test case? And the answer is that each test case describes a specific and unique outcome. So every test case, these are all different naming conventions for one type of record in this system. But there's 4 different scenarios for how that name should be accomplished. And so, in this case, it's just looking at the unit type, which is going to change, from one to the other, and then the automation is assigning a different value each time. Let's jump over here real quick. So this is a test case that's obviously a little bit more involved, but you'll notice that it follows the exact same structure. At the top, we have a description of what is it that we're doing to trigger the automation. In this case, it's adding the stage to be loan closed. What is the criteria of the record? What are of the record that needs to be in place in order for this automation to be executed? And then in this case, there are a lot of actions that are achieved. We're creating a whole bunch of tasks. We're creating an ACH record. We're creating an ACH loan record, which is just a junction record. We're creating if the loan equals this. We're also creating an expense revenue and a line item. It's a lot of information on the page, but but it's actually, once you kind of get used to reading these things, it's very, very simple to read through, and it creates an opportunity for everyone to be perfectly aligned on what it is that not only how does the automation work today, but exactly what is it that is changing in any given car. Because as you can imagine, we didn't sit down with the client and have a conversation and write this entire test case in one day, right? It's impossible. When we started building this automation, this thing that happens when a record gets pushed to loan close, we started talking about that far before anybody knew the answers to all of these questions. We started talking about it. They probably said, hey, I think we need a couple tasks and we need an ACH record created when the loan gets pushed to close. It's like, cool. All right, we got that. But because it's documented in this way, we're able to keep coming back to the test case and adding to it by simply changing the color of the font. So it's kind of silly, and you'll see some of these test cases will have multiple font colors, and there's reasons for that. But it's a really significant point, because what this allows us to do is say everything in this test case that's in black is in place existing behavior. We need to make one tweak to this test case, to this scenario. And it's simply that instead of all of the loans with loan deal equals test loan deal and the first loan start date having, you know, all the following have been updated as followed. It's just this one loan that meets this updated criteria that's going to be pushed to in place. And that's a huge deal because, as I mentioned at the beginning, the test case here, which is the requirements that we're handing to our developers, are also these instructions that are being used by the QA folks to test this before it's pushed into production. And so what that allows us to do is ensure that the only change that's actually being made in the automation is this one here, and everything else is exactly the same. Really big deal. Uh, any questions about that? Or any thoughts? Does this like at this point, based on what you guys have seen so far, I think that like this has been like a game changer for my company because we are developers and we're building larger automations all day, every day. And it's a team of folks that are working together. And there are people that are dedicated to testing, and there are people that are dedicated to developing, and there are people that are whose job it is to just write test cases, essentially. Do more than that, but at its core. And I guess what I'm curious is like, there's a lot more I want to show you guys, but at this point, based on what you've seen so far, do you think that this is overkill for the type of work that you guys are doing, or do you think like, uh, yeah, okay, it could be helpful. I could see if you're a single admin, um, is this the right answer? I'm not sure. I think it could be helpful because simply having great documentation is always valuable. But what are you guys thinking based on what you've seen just so far?
I think it depends on the nature of your relationship with the stakeholders. I think if some people need definitely need evidence of what you're going to do, and they need to sort of sign off on what you're doing and make sure that you've covered all the scenarios that you need to. And I think it also does help in some cases where you need to establish what finished looks like. And I think in this case, you're clearly defining, okay, when we do all these things, then when we're done, right? And I think that's super helpful in some cases.
Cool. Yeah, totally.
And Jade has a comment. Do you think down the road you can do something like a subflow idea where this type is a chunk of criteria you can sub in instead of writing it again in the rich text?
Yeah, awesome for sure. So we're on the same page. This is exactly where we're going. Yes, we have that, and I'll show it to you right now. And if you were to click through our test cases, you would see slightly different conventions over time, and some of these things have evolved and improved. But we have solved for that with basically in what I like to think of as invocable test cases. One is actually this test case right here, which is just a list of holidays. That this is one, as you can see, is related to a ton of other test cases. There are just a massive number of automations that say, assign this date. The date to assign to this field is close date plus 20, unless the result of that lands on the weekend or a holiday as listed in the list of holidays related test case. This has been a big one because it's referenced in a lot of automations. And actually, unfortunately, we've maxed out. There's some automations that run when you create related test cases and you update related test cases. That I'll kind of show you in a second. And there's more than 11, but we've hit a max with the number of related test cases that we can use, and so we just hyperlink back to this one in those scenarios. But for sure, a lot of these test cases have related test cases that they'll describe, that they'll mention, they'll call out. And so, line item naming convention is a good one. So a line item was created by this automation, the value assigned to the line item name, see the related test case, line item naming convention. You can click into there, and that's going to contain some rules on how to calculate the name for the line item. Which if you some older test cases, for sure, we were copying and pasting the text over and over, and then every time we made an edit to it, we had to make sure we edited all of them, and inevitably we didn't. And so it got to be such a headache. We actually just split it out, and whenever possible now, when there's criteria or logic or a list of dates that need to be referenced in multiple test cases, it gets split out and put into a related test case. And it's kind of cool because oftentimes the test cases will actually mirror the structure of the components that comprise the automation. Not always, and it's probably not usually, but sometimes, and that's kind of nice. But yeah, for sure, that's exactly what we're up to. What about other folks? Is this invocable data chain? Yes, it is an invocable data chain, Jade, and it has a limit. Any other? Does this look like could be helpful to folks that are in this group? Does this look like it's overkill for what people are doing, other than or other people that are in the group here? Evan, what do you think? Do you think you could use this?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to see more though. Keep going.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So I'm gonna go take a couple steps back. And let's go back here to our unit naming convention user story. So we talked about these 4 test cases. They're all very similar. But each one is unique to a particular outcome. And the thing that typically makes them unique is the prior values. What is the data that existed prior to the automation being triggered? But sometimes it's a variation of how, like the triggering event. And so, what was the unit type on the unit that was created? Sometimes it could be other related data, but all coming back to a unique outcome. Important piece of this. So I'm going to keep going. The other thing that's cool here is our user version. And so this one only has 2 user story versions. But a user story version is a snapshot of the user story when the card in Trello was pushed from solution design to ready for dev. So you can imagine that scenarios, and you might have run into this before, where okay, yeah, we're going to make this one little change to the unit naming convention, and we're going to add another convention for retail spaces. Cool, no problem, super simple. And you push it over, and it's in development before it, or maybe it's in code review, or maybe it's in QA, whatever the case is. It hasn't been deployed to production, and then you get a second requirement that's another change to the same user story. That talks about changing, instead of the condo naming convention being property address, city, we want to include a unit number in the unit name. And so you have a card that's in QA that contains the snapshot of the version of the user story as it existed when that card got pushed to ready for dev. And then you've got another update to the same user story that wasn't there when the first card got pushed into process, into development, pushed over to ready for dev. And oh crap, the first card failed QA, right? And so the second card's been pushed into ready for dev. It started development, and the second card's in development. The first card got pushed back, and so that's actually now also in development. And the second, for some reason, like the second card makes it to QA, but the first card hasn't been fixed, right? you can imagine these scenarios, like that's a pretty simple one. This is a pretty simple user story. It gets a lot more complex and have a lot more detail. And it happens quite frequently where we'll have 2 or 3 generations of changes to the same user stories that are pushed from solution design to some stage between ready for dev and completed, pushed to production, that are all kind of bouncing around at the same time. And this is why user story versions are absolutely essential to what we do. And so, just to kind of recap, the user story version is the version of the user story as it existed when that card got pushed from solution design to ready for dev. So if we click into any one of these user story versions, it's going to look a lot like a user story. Being linked to test cases, it's actually linked to test case versions. There's an automation running behind the scenes on test cases that every time you edit a test case, we actually create a new one. So 266 versions of this test case, and that's extraordinarily helpful because oftentimes you make a mistake. I make a lot of mistakes, and or we get halfway through development and the client says, actually, you know what? Let's change that. Let's go back to the way it was, or let's tweak it. And so the ability to go back and see what was the test case when prior to us working on these parts can be extraordinarily helpful. And a user story version is that snapshot of the latest test case versions at the time that the card got pushed to ready for dev. And this is actually where people are really working. So the developers are clicking into here, they're reviewing the test case versions to see what is it that's changed as a part of this card. They're making those changes until they think they've got it solved, and then they're pushing it to QA. And so the other thing that you'll notice here on a user story version is a list of tests. And we've got this little button here that creates a test and the related test items. And these are extremely powerful. This is where the QA folks actually live. If we click into one of these, let's click into a failed one because that's more fun. Again, you've got a record that doesn't have a ton of information. These are really simple, and it's kind of a place to just aggregate the test items. But you can kind of think of it, the test looks a lot like a user story or a user story version. It's because it is very similar. And the test items are copies of the test case versions, the version of the test case that existed at the time the card was pushed into ready for dev. And this is where the QA folks work. And this is really, really cool because as their testing instructions are here, they know exactly what they're expected, what are the prior values that need to exist? What is the thing that is expected to trigger the automation to fire, and what are the values that need to be validated in order to confirm the automation's working is all right here for them. And then this is the place where they communicate what is it that failed in their test. They provide a link to a screen capture, which is just a Loom recording of them doing the test, and a link to the actual test record, the record that they used to do the test with. And this is I think it's all the most valuable thing. This is also the most valuable part of the solution because this gives us an opportunity to have a conversation. In this case, it's just, okay, let's fail the test item. But this gives us an opportunity to have a very productive, efficient, and detailed conversation about, okay, yeah, that failed, and that's a bug that we're introducing as a result of this card. Let's push it back. Or that failed, but you know what? I think that's a bug that's already in production. And we'll go and do the research and confirm that, yeah, that's already change through production. Have an opportunity to be specific about that. There's this bug that's in production, it came up in testing. What do we want to do about it? We can just leave it. It's in production, probably means it's not really a problem. Or follow up with a second card to resolve that bug. But the fact that we're able to have that conversation here on the test item, let's see if we can find one that's more interesting. Yeah, so here the QA said, hey, here's what I found that I don't think is working. She's able to say 2C, and that's in create. So I can go into that test case. I can find 2C, and she said, the closing manager is a user with consulting loan deal, closing manager not equal true, which presumably does not meet the requirements as described in that test case. And then we can dig into it and have a conversation about what to do. We can involve the developer if we'd like. And I can go back and watch a recording of the test so that I can say, actually, you know what? Hey, you missed a step here, or you know what? I forgot to include a detail in the test case. I can see that because I just watched you do the test. I need to fix the test case and get that in there, or whatever. But the having this all in one place is a really, really big deal. I think this is Evan's favorite part. I think.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. The link back to the test records that myself or a developer can do a little bit more research, or um, on what happened. If there's an exception email, if it hit an unhandled error during the test, the QA person will actually post that exception email in chatter here. So that's like super gift wrapped, right? For me, I love it because I get an email notification that, or it tells me exactly what happened. I click in here, and then on this page, I have all the information I need to get an answer back to them, and like a very, very specific answer back to them in a couple of minutes. Where like there's no way I'm going to remember all this information. Is not, and there's no way that like we could all get aligned on all this information if it wasn't really well documented. And I think I made this point earlier, but I think one of the distinctions between developing in Salesforce and developing software in like the rest of, not in Salesforce, is that we're not really building UI, and there's so much of the infrastructure is solved for by Salesforce, right? So much we don't need to test the login flow, we don't need to test the page layouts because Salesforce is providing the infrastructure to support the page layouts. The things that we're developing it's this, right? It's this value goes in this field, and this value goes in that field, and this value goes in that field. Which is kind of why we landed on this solution. What do you guys think? Any questions at that point?
It still feels a little abstract to me. What's the relationship between the test and test case records and then like actual flows?
Test and test case record. Yeah, cool. So the test is up here, and what it's doing is it's really just a place to keep track of the status of the test, passed or failed or in progress, who the developer was, and then provide a list of test items. And so it is possible for a test to pass even though a test item fails. But typically, the test is failed if any one test item fails. And the test items are a copy of the test case version for that user story version that is related to that particular card on Trello or whatever your Kanban or whatever your tool is for managing your pipeline. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense to you?
It helps.
How can I help more? What part is that? It's funny because there's a bunch of places in here: user story version, and test. All three of those, they're not doing a lot. They're sort of like just a parent record to keep the detail records, right? They serve a purpose and they're helpful and critical, but there's not a lot happening here. What
So
else?
those test items are, I can see that right. Those test items that are just based on, those are tests from whatever version. Whatever version you tested, right? So that's a pass or fail on whatever version.
Exactly. Yep. So the details in here are just a copy of the test case version from, which is the version that existed when this card was it was handed over to the developers. And then the test item is storing whether or not, when the QA person completed their test, whether or not it passed or failed, and then providing all the supporting details. So this is the first time I've given this presentation, and I'm thinking I should next time maybe have a schema of some sort to show these objects and with a little description for each. There's a bunch of objects in here. Some of them are really funny. I won't get into all of them, but my favorite object ever is in here. It's called USV TCV, and it's the junction between user story version and test case version. But and if you really want to get your mind wrapped around the axle, I can show you the tests and test items that describe the automations that support our tests.
It just never ends, guy.
We are in the matrix. Yes, that's yeah. What else?
That's
What are
really
the
cool.
questions?
Well, I think it'd be cool to see you run through like a new request comes in and like show us every step of the process,
Cool.
start to finish for something. Start
Yeah.
with a simple example.
Yeah.
That way we can see how all the parts work and in context of something we're trying to develop.
Awesome. Let's do it. So we're going to pretend that this has to do with acquisitions at SPG Capital. But we're going to go ahead and create a user story, and we're just going to call it Evan's Wonderful Automation. No, let's give something real. Opportunity closed, but it'll be Evan's opportunity closed, right? So user story, we just created a user story record, and again, there's like nothing here, right? It's just a user story. It's just a name and related to an epic. We're going to create the test case, and there's this little junction that exists between test cases and user stories, and that's because the same test case can be related to multiple user stories. And we're going to call this Evan's opportunity create Evan's opportunity. And we come over here, and we're just going to say create an opportunity that meets the following criteria. Record type, which is a field, so we're going to make it bold, equals Evan. And let's say that's our only criteria. And we want this automation to fire anytime you create an opportunity with record type equals Evan. And so the results of that automation, we're going to say the test opportunity was updated as follows: amount bold equals $1 bazillion, and close date equals today, and task record was created with the following values. Subject equals call Evan assigned to equals user that created the opportunity. Okay, cool. Anything else, Evan? Anything else? What happens with your opportunities?
That is more than enough. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Chatter posts,
Might need some more
emails.
zeros on the amount though.
That's true. You farm.
Yes, always more zeros.
There's not enough zeros. Yeah, it's priceless. Yep. All right, cool. So we've got our users, we've got a user story and a test case. And in this instance, we've only got one scenario, we've only got one expected outcome, and so we only have one test case here, and that's totally fine. That's how most of these started. Yeah, and usually it's this literally, when this was created, this one, but whichever one you're looking at over here is a little bit longer, and there's lots of other examples that are even longer than this. This started with like 2 or 3 actions. And so the life cycle of these things is it gets created like this. We will relate it to a deliverable. So Evan's opportunity, magical automation. We're going to relate it to SPG and acquisitions. We're going to get, this is a big one. This is a 40-hour project. And so we're going to create the deliverable in our system, which is kind of just a placeholder for the Trello card. It's a little bit duplicative, unfortunately. But once we've created that, we're going to just put it in our handy dandy little user story version flow here. Click next, and that's going to create our user story version. So I'm going to take this card or this user story version, and I'm going to say, okay, this is ready to start working on. Put the user story version on the card. Assign it to myself so that nobody starts working on this. And the next developer who needs something to work on is going to grab this card, build that automation, push it over to QA, code review, QA. And then the person in QA is going to link, both the developer and the person in QA is going to use that user story version to link into Salesforce. The QA person is going to click the new test button, which created the test and the test item. And then they're going to open up the test item. They're going to complete the test, record the screen capture, link back to the test record. And if it failed, there's no need to post anything here if it passes. But if it failed, put a description of exactly what failed, and what did they see happen, or if they had an unhandled error, post the error, the email.
Awesome.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
So wait, you're gonna put, if it fails, you're gonna put the test result as failed, but then you're gonna put it in the post, why it failed?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So on the test item, we're just going to mark it as passed or failed. We're going to pretend it was this record, put that there, and then the screen capture from Loom, put that here, save it, and then we do need a screen capture in order to save that. So, and then we say, hey, at Mike, I think you have a user here. There you go. You're not going to be able to see this. Do that be failed because the task was assigned to Evan instead of me. And then the test is done. Mike can come in here and say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Let's go ahead and push this back. Goes back to the developer, and the developer opens this up. They see exactly what failed, and they say, okay, yeah, shoot, I need to fix that part about how we're calculating who this task should be assigned to. They can fix that one little issue and then push it back to QA, and it gets tested again.
Very cool.
I think so.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other thoughts or questions?
Do you have any metrics on like process improvement, development time?
Say one more time.
Maybe like success metrics on the new process?
Like what this has done for us.
Yeah.
So before this, we were writing all of our requirements down in a OneNote. But it's been many, many years since we started using this. So I don't know. I don't. Is that Chris, by the way? I can't
That
really
is
see.
Chris.
Hey,
Yes.
Chris. Yeah,
I got
I can. I recognize your voice. I can't quite see. You guys are too tiny on the screen, but awesome. Is this? Does anybody think that this could be? Evan, you mentioned this could be helpful for you. I can put my email in the chat if anybody is interested in this. We are going to turn it into an unmanaged package. We are turning it into an unmanaged package. I would also be happy if somebody would like to use this. I'd be happy to like help you get a couple test cases set up and kind of show you how this works. There's also test case conventions that I mentioned at the beginning that describe how to construct a test case. And what the heck is all of this colorful font about, sort of things. So I'll put that in the chat, and I think it probably was in. I don't know if you. I was linked in the emails as well, so you guys can find me, and then be happy to send you a link to the package as soon as it's ready. If you think it'd be helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks so much.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us. Any final thoughts or questions for Guy? Yeah,
Cool.
thanks for being here. It was exciting to see. We're looking forward to that package coming out in a few weeks. And anybody going to Mid-Atlantic Dreaming, you'll see Guy up there. Mike will be there doing their presentations. So it'll be a good time.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time.
Appreciate it. We'll close
Thanks,
down the
Guy.
Zoom now.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See you guys.
See ya.